Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads and living room TVs. And then soon they'll be live again from the building, but more info on that in the coming weeks. I'm Luke Emery and I'm the Pervasive Media Studio producer. I am a white man with a large ginger beard. Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. There we go. The first, I knew I was going to make a mistake and then I left the audio on. Let's try that again. I'm Luke Emery and I'm the Pervasive Media Studio producer. I'm a white man with a large ginger beard and a small mohawk, and I'm wearing a checked shirt and I'm sat in front of an abstract painting and a plant. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. An especially big welcome to any of you out there who are new to what we do. And for those of you, here is a little bit more about us. The studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology with everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between the Watershed, the University of Bristol and the University of West of England, and we're a home for early stage ideas, new companies, and we're a meeting place for both creative and commercial industries. We're a studio space offering desks, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities all for free for our residents. And ultimately, we're a safe place for people to take risks at early stages in their practice and make time for collaboration. For this week's talk, we're going to hear all about MiMU Gloves, which are a wearable motion-based musical instrument and controller. And we're hearing from two artists, Andrea Spisto Amble Skuse and Izzi Valentine, who coordinated a residency that the two artists have been working on with those gloves. We're going to hear all about their experience of working with these magical musical gloves just in a minute. There will be a Q&A at the end with the talk running at roughly 40 minutes. If you want to ask any questions, pop them in the chat window as and when you think of them, and we'll pick them out to ask the speakers. Or if you like, you can tweet us at PM Studio UK and feel free to share this link. We are live and we would like as many people as possible to join us. Quick trigger warning, there are some videos in this talk that contain flashing images, and there is a brief mention of children's homes in Serbia. A captioned and recorded version of the talk will be available here after the talk is finished. Before we start, next week's talk comes from artist Katie Connor. As part of her spring residency at the Watershed, Katie has been exploring hydroponics, which is the art and science of growing plants in a liquid water media. And in this talk, she'll share some of the things she's developed in her residency, where she established several different hydroponic systems in her studio at Spike Island in Bristol. You can get news on all our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, or following us on Twitter at PM Studio UK or on Instagram at Pervasive Media Studio, or by subscribing to our newsletter on our website. Don't forget, whilst you're sat there listening to me talk, hit subscribe on this YouTube channel so you don't miss out on all our latest content. And while you're there, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Now, I'd like to hand over to Izzi Valentine, who's going to give you a little bit of insight into the residency and introduce our two artists.
I'm so sorry. Hi, I'm Izzi Valentine. I'm a white person with short brown hair, blue glasses, orangey red lipstick, a check shirt, and I'm sitting on a green sofa. I'm an artist working in film, costume, jewellery, e-textiles, and more recently curation and production, which is this residency. I think of my practice as neuroqueer in that it's very much a lived refusal of categories and boundaries, because that's how I experience the world as a neurodivergent and queer person. And for me, these two things are very connected. And my work is very interdisciplinary, exploratory, and messy as a response to that, and also kind of a celebration of it. So the residency came about by me bringing two parts of my life together, which are MiMU Gloves, where I'm an e-textiles technician. So I sit in the studio in Dalston, kind of putting electronics together and putting them into textiles. And Film Pro, where I assist the artistic director, Chala Kimyonchi. So Film Pro is a digital arts organization by and for disabled artists who support artists to make their work, commission artworks, host events and exhibitions, and they do much more. And MiMU produce gloves, which are a gestural interface for music production and performance. And they were developed with that in mind. And then they've also kind of been used for controlling visuals, lighting, film, and various other things. So to give you a taste, here's Lula XYZ using the gloves.
Hey, I'm Lula. I make music with my hands on the fly, like so. I do that with my lover, Ableton, and MiMU.
Lula, lil, lul, 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 lul.
I am one of a handful of musicians who have this prototype. In another galaxy, I'm just a star, but here. My aim is to make music that speaks to all your senses. And to do that, I must communicate with mine. So from my hands to your ears.
So I decided to bring together Film Pro and MiMU in a residency program, which became Remote Control. This was partly inspired by Chris Halpin, who's a musician who already uses MiMU Gloves as an accessible instrument. A few years ago, due to his increasingly impaired hand movement, he found playing guitar had become largely inaccessible to him. Then through Drake Music, he began playing MiMU Gloves, which he can program and calibrate specifically to his range of movement, allowing him to make and perform again. He's since played MiMU Gloves on stages across the world. So we wanted to open up the gloves as a creative and access tool and see how various artists and musicians would use them in that particular context. We put an open call out, which had an amazing response, and Chris, Imogen Heap and I selected 5 artists. They are Venus Ex Machina, a composer, producer and technologist with a background in mathematics and engineering. Rylan Gleave, a composer and experimental vocalist who also fronts a black metal band. And Ben Lunn, a composer, conductor, musicologist, teacher and writer. And then also Amble and Andrea, who are with us today. So I'll allow them to introduce themselves in a moment. So quite a varied group in terms of their interests, styles and approaches. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with them. The aim of the residency wasn't so much to kind of commission new artworks as a defined outcome, but instead to create like a really open experimental kind of place for people to explore this new tool. And through like a series of workshops with various artists and technologists, I think hopefully we've created that. We'll hear what the artists have to think about it. And there's also a research element of the residency led by Tom Mitchell, who's at University of West England and also involved with Pervasive Media Studio. So now I'm going to hand over to Andrea Spisto to introduce themselves, and together we'll talk about their experience, and then we'll hear from Amble Skuse.
Hi, my name is Andrea Spisto, and as you heard from Izzi, I'm working on the remote control residency with the MiMU Gloves. So out of everyone in the group, my background isn't as focused on music. It's much more of a physical theater background. So I studied physical theater and clowning. I call myself a neuroqueer clown as well. So someone who is connecting neurodiversity and movement and also experiences of identity and queerness. And yeah, so that's kind of me and a little bit about myself. And yeah, it's been really wonderful to get to work with MiMU Gloves and the whole team, really.
To start with, I wanted to know what drew you to the residency in the first place?
Well, like I think every kid kind of dreams about being able to move their hands and to be able to make music. I feel like it's such a playful and really natural kind of imagination of how we can create music. And because I had a background in physical theater where we focus on movement and how to identify our own body movements and how we have our own ways of expressing ourselves. And really, I really got really empowered about, you know, performance through that, because I had lots of challenges with language and, you know, being from another country and moving here. And movement is a way that we find we can become way more accessible in terms of how we express ourselves with others. And I think MiMU Gloves is a perfect connection of that. You know, it's like, how do we develop movement, and then how do we develop it into a world of like sound? So yeah, when I saw it, I was just like, this isn't real. Like, this is magic. This is science fiction. This is, you know, the future. Yeah, and I think that's something interesting about, you know, MiMU Gloves. The technology is very, yeah, playful and yeah, science fiction.
How have using the gloves affected your work so far then, and how do you kind of hope to take them in the future?
Well, it's been a really interesting journey for me, because so I come from a background where we study how to make work with nothing. It's like the most low tech study. We just use the body to make sounds, to make atmospheres, you know, it's using nothing to create something. So obviously when I first got the gloves, it was just like, whoa, there's so much software, there's so much possibility. You can kind of get lost in, you know, Ableton and Glover, and having so much option. So I've been kind of trying to really place limitations on the options so that I can build a relationship between me and the gloves without kind of getting lost too much in the tech, which I'm still learning, because obviously we've only been working with them for a couple of months. But my ideal vision is to use the gloves as a way to enhance like a clowning and movement performance. So like use the gloves in a way that, you know, allows me to experiment with comedy and, you know, kind of trigger things when people aren't expecting it. Or, you know, the other day I was really inspired by getting washing up gloves and like kind of wearing washing up gloves like on top of the MiMU gloves. So like you can't actually see that like I have this amazing technology, and it's actually just these like washing up gloves that are creating this scene, and kind of playing, you know, playing with like no tech and, you know, high tech worlds. I also found like a tiny kid's piano on the street the other day, which doesn't work. And I had this dream about wearing like this massive suit with my MiMU gloves and like playing like this amazing, you know, piano concerto, like with the gloves on this tiny kid's piano, you know, and just really playing with the gloves is kind of where I'm really seeing this going.
Kind of tied into that, like in your work coming from clowning and physical theatre, there's a lot of room for the accidental and incidental and kind of using that. How do you see that kind of tying in?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because again, you know, what I would like to do is set things up so things get triggered without me necessarily realizing. So obviously with the gloves, I mean, we've had a little bit of an intro, but we can create our own hand positions in order to dictate, you know, what sounds come out of them, right? So you can kind of like, you know, create like a variation of kind of the same hand position and create it so that you accidentally trigger things without realizing, and then you have to kind of react in the moment to these triggers. So which is, it happens like quite easily. So you kind of work backwards, you kind of make it so that the gloves, you know, you position your hands in loads of different ways so the gloves can get triggered just as you're moving into another movement. And then suddenly you have the sound of like a car horn or like whatever when you're trying to play the piano, and you're like, oh, you know, and like, I don't know, just play with the fact that, you know, technology does fail us, you know, like it does. So how can we find joy in that, you know, and make fun of it. I mean, we've seen that this year with so many Zoom calls. There's been already, you know, so much comedy created out of that. You know, we had Jackie Weaver, we had like all these moments on Zoom that people kind of take over and they're like, this is amazing. And it's kind of the joy of the failures of technology and the inability to use them. Because you know, I don't fully understand all of the software, and I probably won't, because, you know, it's huge. So how can I use that to my advantage?
That's a lovely approach.
Yeah.
And finally, I just wanted to ask how neuroqueerness kind of ties into your work and informs it.
Yeah, so I think neuroqueerness is definitely a new term that I've come across, and I'm sure a lot of people here are going to be like, what does that mean? But it's been really wonderful to feel that, you know, like neurodiversity is something that definitely ties in with your expression of identity, and that there is a fluidity in how you identify with all your identifiers, you know, and that as a neurodiverse person, I always feel like I see beyond what is happening in the moment, and it can sometimes be really confusing, and I don't know where I am, and I don't know what person I am. Whereas now, like, I feel that that word kind of opens it up and is like, you know, you can be in drag and you can be performing in front of a camera, and the camera's behind you and it's representing a part of yourself, and then the music's representing another part of yourself, and it all ties in. And maybe I'm not actually speaking, or I'm not actually writing a monologue, but through this expression of like the way that I see the world, what I film, what I project, like maybe through all of these collection of, you know, visuals and aesthetics and, you know, and what you hear, someone out there can look at it and be like, I really get that, you know, I get your vibe, or like, I understand you beyond kind of what I can really explain through language. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense and it's relatable to me too.
I hope it's relatable to some people here.
Okay, let's hand over to Amber. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Other video, you just see a webcam of me and they blend together. Okay, great. Shall I start again? Tell me when to start again. We ready? Okay. Sorry about that. You've all just seen my arms waving around. So I'm a composer and sound artist. I do a little bit of performance art stuff. And I've been working with body sensors probably for about 8 years now. So I've worked with EEG sensors, which monitor your brain activity, and also ECG monitors, which are like pulse rate. So for example, with the EEG sensor, I've used it to mix soundscapes. So the data that's coming from my brain, the more stressed I am, the more loud things get, the more calm I am, the quieter things get. With the ECG, I was using it to like light up little fairy lights on the pulse. So as you hold a candle, it flashes along to your pulse. And then working with the MiMU Gloves has been really kind of mind-blowing, because it's the inverse of what I would normally do. I would normally take an involuntary body activity like electrical magnetic in your brain or pulse sensors, and sonify that or turn that into a part of the work and allow the body to speak through the electronics. Whereas with the gloves, it's kind of the opposite of that. You're telling the electronics what to do by lifting and lowering your arm, or whatever gesture you're choosing. So at first that was really kind of difficult to incorporate into my practice. So I kind of came at it sideways and started using video. And I'll just show you a little clip here, but it's a really basic jitter patch that allows you to blend two video screens. So on one side, you'll see video of me making a sound walk in ZKM and videoing the different textures of the floors. I'm a wheelchair user, so I record the sounds of my wheelchair going over textures, and I make video of that as well. And on the other screen, you'll just see a webcam. So it's just like a little test thing to see how the pitch of the gloves can be used to mix video. So if we pop that video on now. So kind of concurrently to this residency, I've also been on a residency in Belgrade to make a sound walk using my wheelchair, which has its own set of challenges as a city that was bombed only about 20 years ago, and a city that is very poor and doesn't have resources for disabled people. Probably won't talk too much about that right now, but as a result, the first thing that I did on my residency was to do a little demo of the MiMU Gloves, and then I had artists who were at that talk wanting to work with them, obviously. So one of the first things I was doing, I met this guy who does martial arts, and we thought it would be really interesting to see what martial arts sounded like. So I made a little sound design patch. And then his hands were too big for my gloves, because I've got tiny hands. I've got the tiny gloves. So we had to strap them onto his wrist, but have the fingers pointing up towards his wrists, which then meant everything was back to front and inside out, because forward was backwards and backwards was forward. But I'll just show this little video of Bosco doing his martial arts with some MiMU glove action happening. So like, I think for a first attempt, that gives us some idea of what's possible. That I think there are moments in that video where it really feels like he's moving the sound around as he moves. In other points, it doesn't quite work, and that's to do with what sensors or what gestures I've connected to what controllers in the patch. So some of them are really effective, like the filter sweep as you go, whoo, and other ones are not as effective. So maybe doing delay with a sound like that, you don't really hear the delay as well. So I'm going to work on that patch. But what's really interesting was that after we'd filmed that little bit, he said that it was like sparring with another person. He was trying to find out where the sound was and where the sound wanted to go and how to shift his energy to get the sound where he wanted it. And it was this really interesting idea that actually he's collaborating with the laptop. I'm not really doing anything apart from pre-making the sound. And that really sparked something, because that's kind of how I feel about doing the body data stuff, is that I feel like I'm collaborating with my own body when it's mixing for me and I'm playing along to a mix. So then I did a little afternoon with a dancer who's Russian. She's called Olya. And again, we just worked with the same patch that we had for Bosco, but this time she could put the gloves on. So we were able to like do some fist shapes and some points and do a little bit more than just XYZ, which is what Bosco had. He just had kind of where in space am I? Whereas Olya had like control a little bit more. So we'll show that video and see what Olya made of the gloves. So yeah, again, she said it was like dancing with a partner. It was about exploring where the sound was and where she needed to move to work with that partner. And you can really see, I think, in the video that she's improvising, but she's also exploring the sound and finding it. And sometimes she manages to find it and hold it really still. And other times it kind of slips away from her and she's trying to like find another control. And sometimes she wants it to move, and sometimes she wants it to stop, and sometimes she's finding something that works with one arm but then doesn't work with the other. And again, that's to do with what I've attached things to, and some things are more effective than others. So it's like a learning experience in space for her, but again, for me, it's about looking at the patches that I've made and seeing like, okay, that's really effective, and whoever's working with the gloves can really feel that movement. But this doesn't really express what they're doing. So what do I need to change in order to make that more of an expressive gesture? So there's like a lot to dip into there. I'm going to have another session with Olya on Sunday, I think. But it's just actually been great to have this residency in Belgrade where I can just like grab other artists and put the gloves on them and be like, okay, try and see what you find in this patch. Let's see what works, what doesn't work. So the last video I'm going to show you is like a work in progress that I shared in Belgrade that kind of triggered off these workshops. So this was actually before Bosco and Olya. And it is really simple. Again, it's just video mixing, but this time with 2 gloves. So I'm mixing 2 sets of video, and one arm, it's just pitch, so it's up and down. One arm is blending video between street textures and photographs and videos from Serbian children's homes for disabled children. And the other is live mixing the webcam as before. Just a bit of context, I suppose. As a disabled person in Serbia, I'm trying to make this sound walk. And I think, you know, when I've made stuff in France and in Germany and the UK, I have absolutely no problem calling out a lack of access or cobbles or steps or, you know, places where I can't get to. But then in Belgrade, I feel so privileged. Like I've got more than most of the Belgrade people that are hosting me, and they're not disabled. So then I started to research, like, where are all the disabled people? Because I'm not seeing them. And the stories are really kind of dark and complex, because there is a lack of resources for disabled people. And there's also a kind of cultural stigma about disability, still coming from the church. You know, interviewed a woman who badly needs a wheelchair, can't afford a wheelchair. And she said, but anyway, even if I had a wheelchair, I live on the 8th floor and most of the time the elevator doesn't work. And even if I could get downstairs, the streets are so badly potholed, I actually couldn't use the wheelchair to get anywhere. So there's these kind of multiple layers of issues. And they still have a model of institutionalization of severely disabled children. And there's a recent report, sorry, trigger warning, some of this is a bit dark, but there's been a recent report about children's homes in Serbia that relates to international disability and international conventions on torture. And effectively, because they are so short-staffed, severely disabled children are tied to their beds with bandages to stop them harming themselves. And I was really struck by all of this. You know, I'm in Belgrade, I've got these incredibly expensive gloves, I've got this incredibly expensive laptop. And here I am supposed to be making a walk about disability, and I am so privileged compared to how the disabled people have to live here in Serbia. And because it's not part of the EU, there aren't any EU laws to protect them. And they can't leave Serbia and go and live somewhere else because they're not part of the EU. And so I'm still really battling with how to use that information and what I need to do as a disabled artist in this context. Because it's not enough for me to just point out that there are potholes. Like, that's not, everyone knows that the place was being bombed 20 years ago. So what can I do? What should I do? Whose voices should I be listening to? So I'm still working on that. And I know it's a huge contradiction, and it's really like morally difficult to work out what to do in this situation. So that's a bit of background to the video you're about to see. It's just a kind of performative response to having to think about all of that. And it's using the gloves to mix video and using bandages and kind of hospital imagery to evoke some of those thoughts about who am I as a disabled person? And if I was born here, would I have had a very different life? And, you know, is it a case of luck? Is it a case of, you know, universal rights for disabled people to live independently, to live freely? And if those children are, and they use the term invalid here as well, and I've been thinking a lot about that term invalid. I've had people like asking me, oh, are you an invalid? And it always triggers this idea of being an invalid member of society. I'm not generating wealth, I'm not working, I'm not, you know, as the Nazis called disabled people useless eaters, we are seen to be taking but not contributing. And so all of that ties into what I'm kind of trying to figure out what my work will be from here. And my feeling is that I've got 6 days left and I'm not going to make something that really addresses all of that. And I don't want to rush it and half make something that's a bit slapdash. So I think this could turn into a big piece of work. Anyway, I'm going to show you a bit of the video now. I've given you all that background to what's been going on. And this is the kind of work in progress that I've got to so far in Belgrade with the gloves. So that's like just a little taste of the things I've been doing. It's very kind of research based and play based at the moment. I'm trying to just put the gloves in various different environments and see what happens and see see what we learn from each situation, because I think each time we do it we learn something new, and it's just been this kind of endless journey of broadening, I think, my practice and the way I think about making things. So it's been really eye-opening, and actually I don't want it to end. I want to keep doing this, like maybe a year-long residency instead of 4 months, because there's definitely a lot further to go with thinking about how this relates to disability.
Thank you all so much for giving us some insight into the way you've all been working with the gloves. I really like the idea of what does martial arts sound like. So the questions are coming in already in the chat, which is great. Kicking off with Jade, who asks, and maybe if I'll give this one to you, Andrea, and give Amble a little bit of a break initially. How did you begin to incorporate the gloves into your practice when there are potentially so many possibilities of what you could have done?
So yeah, this is the big challenge. So I actually had a conversation with Imogen Heap, who gave me really good advice, and she kind of knew a little bit about my background, and she told me that she had one friend who was like a surfer dude, kind of chilled out guy, and he tried on the gloves, and for ages he just focused on like moving sound very gently from like one side to the other, and like exploring how like such small movement, like just one sound, like how you can go really deep into it. And that really inspired me to just be like, okay, like start small, like focus, just start small, because you're going to have these gloves forever, so just start at the beginning. And that was a really helpful advice for me. Yeah.
Lush. Amble, how about you?
I found it really difficult because I don't use Ableton usually, and so I was having to learn Ableton and the gloves at the same time, and it was sort of such a big jump from my normal practice, and like it was the inverse of what I normally do. So I moved into video and just got them into Max MSP, which was like a playground where I'm more comfortable, because in Ableton I was just like, what is it doing? So when I got them into Max MSP and was like, oh, I could just fade these two videos, that's where it started to feel comfortable to me and make sense. And since then I've transitioned back to Ableton, and it makes more sense, but it was almost like I had to go outside of what I normally do and then come at it from a different direction, because trying to integrate it with what I normally do just was too kind of like two worlds colliding, and it just wasn't working. So it was like going in through the back door, almost like sneaking in through video back to sound.
Well, I can relate to some of that. I have also hit several brick walls with Ableton in my time, and I don't think I've ever really found a way around it, to be honest with you. Another question, Luke Child asks for both of you, so but if I come to you first, if you could apply the gloves to any art form or practice you're less familiar with, what area do you think would be really interesting, and why?
I really enjoyed the martial arts stuff, I have to say. I don't know if that's an art form, but I really did enjoy seeing somebody fighting a soundscape. It was just like, yeah. I mean, other than that, I also did a drawing thing, and that's really interesting because she was doing like live drawing on a piece of paper on the wall, but the movements are so much smaller than dance and martial arts. So creating a patch for that is a completely different way of thinking, because you've got the two-dimensional, like up, down, left, right, but then obviously she's drawing with one hand and not the other. So do you get her to draw with both hands and do the movements like they're so much smaller? Like, so how do you make a sound patch for drawing? Or maybe you don't. Maybe it's to do with you put a webcam up and then you make the gloves do some kind of video trail on top of the drawing, so it becomes almost like augmented reality. So that's something that we want to explore as well with her. But yeah, it was a really different way of thinking about the patch than the martial arts and the dance patches. Kind of trickier.
And Andrea, how about yourself? Is it more surfing?
Well, actually, one of my initial ideas was to incorporate it into magic. So like having a magician who is actually really experienced at creating magic tricks, like, because a lot of it has to do with hand movements and like kind of the trick of the eye and like that kind of thing. So I would be interested to know, like, you're kind of showing the cards. I would be interested to know like what a magic show might look like, with the gloves, because you're getting like another layer of like the deception. Like, I think that would be really interesting.
Sleight of hand with sound. That is a really nice idea.
Yeah.
And so what happens next for you, Andrea, after what's next with the gloves and your practice?
I mean, I think I'm just going to try and incorporate it into every project that I'm doing right now. Like I have a big show that's been postponed that's meant to be on at Soho Theatre, which is like a mix of clowning, cabaret, music. And it was meant to happen like right when the pandemic started. And it's a solo show where, like there's a big combination of things. And yeah, I think for me, I really just want to begin to, incorporate the gloves into every practice and like, just keep going further and building the language further with everything. So, that's something that I would really like to do.
Great. Amber, another question from the chat for you, if I may. How would you compare how you thought about your own practice before you encountered the gloves, and now how do you think about it now that you've used them?
Oh, I don't know. I think gloves are helping me collaborate more than I normally would. I'm usually very self-contained as a composer. I stay at home and work on my laptop because I'm usually too knackered to collaborate, and I can't think in the same time frame as other people because of my disability. And so it's quite hard to be in a studio and responding to like all different stimulus happening at the same time. Whereas with the gloves, I've been able to make a patch and then sit in a room and just observe and reflect and then take that away. And that's been really great. That's a way for me to be in a collaborative space without my mind completely melting down by having to make things as people make things, which is not something that I have the energy to do. So yeah, it's kind of helped me collaborate in a weird sort of way. Yeah.
Great. We are running short on time, but there is time for a couple more questions if people want to chuck them in. Just drop them in the chat, I'll pick them out. Izzi, if I could come to you, what's been the most surprising thing for you across the residency in terms of what's been done with the gloves?
I think just seeing how different people's work is. Like, for example, just you two today, seeing like how one person's kind of using something really playful and physical theatre and kind of just exploring kind of the way that you can program something and then kind of ignore it and then through accident kind of come across what you previously set up for yourself. And then in another way, you can be collaborating with people who, as Amble just has been, have really different practices, like in martial arts, in dance, like things that are outside of your everyday, as well as outside of what we kind of expected in the residency. So yeah, I'm just really enjoying like seeing how different people's work is. And then, yeah, Rylan, Ben and Nunto, Venus Ex Machina, like all have really different practices as well. So it's been a joy.
And what happens next? Is there a future residency?
We'll see. We hope so.
Okay, one last thing then, Izzi, how do people find out more about MiMU Gloves and how might they find out if there was a future residency?
So if you follow Remote Control Residency on Instagram or Twitter, or if you follow MiMU Gloves or Film Pro, all of us will be kind of, yeah, sharing that information. So I'd keep your eye on Film Pro and MiMU Gloves. And possibly Pervasive Media, because we might be more closely involved with you in future.
Yeah, come hang out. Let's do martial arts and dancing and play with tiny children's pianos. That would be great. If we find some way to combine all three of those things, that would be ideal. A massive thank you to all three of you for joining us today. And we can't wait to see what you come up with next with the gloves. Before you will go, those of you who are watching, the next week's talk is from artist Katie Connor. As part of her spring residency at Watershed, Katie has been exploring hydroponics, the art and science of growing plants in a liquid water media. And in her talk, she's going to talk about some of the work she's created and established, including some of the exhibition work that was in the Watershed downstairs just this weekend gone. You can get news on all our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio. Following us on @PM Studio UK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or by subscribing to our newsletter on our website. Don't forget, before you go, hit subscribe on this YouTube channel so you don't miss out on all our latest content. And while you're there, give this video a thumbs up. So the more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you all again here, same time, same place next week.